Welcome back to Strictly Money. I mentioned at the top of the show that the greatest wealth transfer is underway. So when it comes to estate planning, it shouldn't be a big surprise that a large number of Canadians want to maximize the inheritance left to their loved ones. However, it's one thing to wish and another to prepare. RBC's latest research is showing that many Canadians, in fact, are not ready. Selene is Director of Wealth Products for RBC Insurance, and she joins me now to discuss common mistakes to avoid so you and your family can keep more of your wealth. Selene, great to have you on.
Thanks, Saijal. Thanks for having me here.
So this is a topic I'm very passionate about because I am seeing firsthand that so many families are not prepared for this. Let's start with the fact, Selene, that 50% of people still don't have a will. And at least from what I see, a lot of them mistake it for an estate plan. Talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And this stat, Saijal, always surprises me. But unfortunately, many Canadians do not prioritize estate planning. Many feel that they're too young or they don't have enough money. Some think that it's too time-consuming, expensive, or complicated, and they don't know where to start. But no matter what stage of life you are, whether you're single, whether you're married, if you have children or not, everyone can benefit from developing an estate plan, which includes a will, and your loved ones will thank you for it, and it'll save them from a lot of emotional stress and grief once you passed away.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dig into the findings then, Selene, because this one really surprised me. 61% don't feel knowledgeable about or have even heard of the probate process. So let's address this. What is a probate, and how does one prepare for it?
Yeah. So when someone passes away, their will must go through a process called probate. And I don't want to oversimplify it because it is very complex, but it's basically the legal process to distribute your assets once you've passed away. And this process can be very costly and very time consuming. Some estates can be settled very quickly, but some can take months or even years to settle.
Really? Wow.
But the fact is that, every will must go through this process called probate.
Okay. And it depends on the jurisdiction as well, right? Like they're all different processes, and the fees related to it are different.
That's correct. Yeah. So every province has its own jurisdiction and their own rules around the probate process. So you really want to be prepared. And I think even more importantly, you want to ensure that your loved ones are prepared so they aren't having to pay for the additional fees, taxes, and out-of-pocket expenses that will start to accumulate once you've passed away. And these are things like costs such as probate fees, legal fees, and also estate taxes.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that then, and the process? And I'm sure you have seen a lot of examples of maybe these unintended consequences. Can you just share a case where you have seen this go on?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, there are costs such as probate, legal fees, and estate taxes, but there are also other costs that people may not have thought about, but should. Things like funeral costs, settling final utility bills, mortgage payments. And these are all expenses that still need to be paid even once you've passed away. And if you don't plan your estate if you don't plan for these as part of your estate, your loved ones could end up having to dip into their own pockets to pay for them while you're waiting for your estate to settle. And I have a great example that I'd love to share. A close colleague of mine whose aunt passed away last fall, she was named as executor of her aunt's estate. And the will is still going through probate. I think it's going on about 10 months now. But until that process is finished, my colleague has no access to any of those funds from her aunt's estate to pay for any of her aunt's bills. So she's had to use her own money to pay for the legal fees, use her own money to pay for taxes, for the final tax return. And she's had to continue paying bills on her aunt's home. So things like lawn maintenance, snow removal, property taxes, things that people may not think about, but because her aunt's house can't be sold until the house is gone, or her will has gone through probate, the house continues to require all of that upkeep. And that amount continues to increase. I think my colleague has had to use about $40,000 of her own savings.
That's unbelievable.
To pay for these.
Yeah, something she probably didn't expect, or he or she probably didn't expect. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what One piece of advice that my colleague does have to offer, though, is that when you are planning your estate, because she's going through it right now, ensure that you have the proper resources and funding for your executor to be able to pay for these costs so they don't have to dip into their own pockets.
I think that's great advice that everyone should heed. Selene, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back. A lot more to unfold here. Welcome back. Selene, let's talk about another finding. 62% didn't know that a will does not prevent an estate from being taxed after death. And I think maybe this goes back to the earlier point that a will is not an estate plan.
That's right. A will is just one document of your overall bigger picture of an estate plan. An estate plan includes a lot more things in addition to your will. And I think, a big part of estate planning is structuring your assets and finances in such a way that will minimize taxes, minimize fees, and maximize what your loved ones received.
That's right. So let's talk about how you minimize the taxes then, because one role that insurance plays, at least I know I've seen this, is that it can help minimize taxes if it's done the right way. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like what, as you said, that's kind of where insurance solutions such as segregated funds can play a role in your estate plan. Because they're insurance products, they don't form part of your will or part of your estate. So they bypass probate entirely. And any inheritances that are passed on to your loved ones are passed on very quickly, typically within days of someone passing. So it really saves your loved ones from time, additional costs, and any added stress and grief that they're already going through. And going back to the example about my colleague having to pay for all of those out-of-pocket expenses on her aunt's estate, why not consider insurance or a segregated fund? What you would do is invest a portion of your savings into that seg fund, name the executor as your beneficiary, and when you pass away, your executor will receive those funds within days, and they won't be out of pocket when they're having to fund these expenses after you pass away.
Selene, can I ask you a quick question then on the seg funds? Because if you're older, would you buy a seg fund? Like, is there one that is at least safe? Because at that age, you don't necessarily want to be invested in some risky stock market as well, the underlying assets, right?
Yes, that's a very good point. Seg funds, we offer funds from very conservative asset allocation to the more aggressive. So like you said, if you're older, you may want to invest more conservatively. And we do have funds within our seg funds that will just do that.
Okay. And then, of course, the important role of life insurance as well, because that's tax-free.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the one thing I say is, we want to talk to a financial advisor, insurance advisor, to make sure that you're setting up your finances and your estate plan to meet your unique circumstances, because everybody is different.
Okay. Selene, another big reason, and I had talked about this with the previous guest, this lack of preparedness often also comes from the fact that we don't like to discuss the inevitable. We don't like to discuss money as well. Can we talk about that? Because I know your research also showed some numbers, like 4 in 10 aged 55 plus are not talking openly about their wishes. You have some tips to overcome that. So let's go through these.
I do, yes. And, based on my own personal experience, I can offer up a few tips on how to approach the subject with the objective of making it more comfortable for everyone, because we don't want that conversation to be so difficult. Number one is take some time to think about how and when you want to bring it up. Who is going to be there? You may want to, schedule it at a time when there's not a lot of stress going on in the family. Number two, make sure that everyone knows what's on the agenda. So no surprises. Number three, above all else, be sensitive and empathetic. You may be ready to discuss your estate, but your loved ones may not be. And the last is start small and take it one step at a time. Let your loved ones know where your important documents are, catalog your assets, liabilities, talk about healthcare wishes. Start small and add on little by little until you and your loved ones are more comfortable with the conversation.
Do you find that, and we only have 20 seconds left of the show, in your case, have you found that they recognize the benefit of talking, or is it still they feel like, I don't really need to do this?
No, absolutely. The conversation needs to happen. It's one of the most important steps in the estate planning process.
Yeah,
So definitely a very, very important conversation to have.
I agree with you. I appreciate you coming on today. Thanks so much, Selene.
Thank you, Saijal.